I'm Jamie S. Rich. I've been working in comics for 20 years. Join me as we dig a little deeper into how comic books are made and get to know the people who make them. This is From the Gutters.
And then was Nightcrawler the first mainstream thing you did with the big two? Or?
Yeah, the first mainstream job I got was for Marvel's Girl Comics initiative, where they were like, hey guys, there are women in comics, you know, shining a spotlight. So I illustrated a story written by G. Willow Wilson, who I think the piece she's most well known for is something called Butterfly Mosque. I'm not sure. She had
the comic Air, and then Aleph the Unknown was her recent novel.
That's right. So she wrote a Nightcrawler story, and I illustrated it, and it was like him in a cabaret, and it's kind of cute. And that was very intimidating. And of course, if I did it now, I would do everything 100% differently. And that was also like my first real taste of hate messages from the internet, like the downside of social media. I feel like back in the letter columns days, in some ways it was easier to make comics because you didn't, like, you may see your fair share of hate letters or whatever in the back of an issue, but you couldn't set up a Google alert and see every little thing that people were saying about you. So I think that Girl Comics gave me my slightly tougher skin.
So what was everybody's issue with the Nightcrawler story?
You know, I mean,
boys been boys.
Boys been boys. No, I'm sure there were lady haters as well. It's really just that they were reacting to the style. They were just, you know, my style is weird compared to mainstream comic art, and it was weirder then when I was straight out of art school and I hadn't done as many comics.
Because you went to what, Cornell?
I went to Cornell.
And you graduated in 2007.
2007. So yeah, it's 2013.
That's not a bad trajectory.
Yeah, 6 years. I've been working steadily since graduating.
You did Tantalize in 2010?
Yeah, I started doing it in 2008, actually.
Okay.
So, you know, with books versus comics, there's like a much longer production lead time. But yeah, like I've been working nonstop since I got out of college on all sorts of stuff, and you know, I'd say there's an equal number of detractors and supporters, but I think that's how it's got to be, because if you don't have strong reactions to your work, positive or negative, then, you know, what are you even doing? You're just making oatmeal if people don't care one way or the other.
I wrote letters that, thank God most of them weren't printed, but I think back of when I was a teenager, and like guys that became then like some of my favorite artists that initially I was like, I hate this. This is terrible.
See, that's the thing. People have sometimes said, like, about my work, this is the ugliest art I have ever seen, you know, and maybe some of that's just internet hyperbole. I like to think, because I'm very down on myself often, like most creative people are, that they mean it from the heart, and that is the worst art they've ever seen, and I made it, and I'm very sad about it. But, you know, I've had haters like that who I recognize their usernames or whatever because it's like stuck in my maw and like emblazoned on my heart, and then years later I'll see them saying something like, I kind of like that one. I'm like, okay, you know, like everyone can be won by persistence, I guess.
So to shift a little bit, what's your process like? Are you old-fashioned ink on paper?
Yeah, well, I was when I did my my young adult graphic novels. It was all ink on paper, but with Mara, actually, it was the first project where I shifted over completely to going all digital. And so now all of my sequential work is completely digital. I do it on the Cintiq tablet and with the Manga Studio program, and it's really helped my productivity a lot. I feel no qualms about it. You know, I still draw traditionally for illustrations and for my own pleasure, because there's no replacing pen and ink. Like that's the stuff. That's the good stuff. But you know, for comics, I feel like the most important thing is hitting deadlines and making work that people want to see. And digital media has really enabled me to like get an effect that I'm proud of and I'm happy with, and that I feel like I can work with, and to do it in a timely manner. So I cannot complain about that.
I think we need to do like an animated GIF of that moment and send it to like every editor in comics.
You think so?
Deadlines and projects.
Deadline is king. You know, like there's that trait saying where it's like you've got to be like nice, talented, and on time. 2 of those 3 things and you'll have a career. It's like, I have really low self-esteem, so I'm like, no, all 3 all the time.
Yeah.
Like, have to keep working. But I really think the deadline is number one. It's got to be.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm stressing over deadlines right now, so I
Me
totally
too.
hear
I
you.
think if you're not stressing about deadlines all the time.
So you worked actually in a fairly progressive digital format, the Marvel Infinite. You did Guardians of the Galaxy with Brian
Yeah, I just
Bendis.
did that. So the Infinite Comics line is something that Marvel's doing where they're free and they're like iPad / Comixology only.
Yeah.
They're not being, I think they're being printed now after the fact.
They'll figure some way out.
They'll figure a way. But yeah, they're made innately for tablet viewing and for Comixology. And it was when they approached me with that job, I said like, yeah, I got to do this because I want to embrace this new media and I don't want to get left behind. And it was a really interesting experience. It was quite a lot more like what I would envision animation to be.
Do you know what your next move is, or are you?
You know, I've got like 3 or 4 little pans on the fire or whatever that idiom is, but no contract signed. So.
Are you looking to write on your own? Or?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've written a couple of things by myself. Like I had an 8-page story in Vertigo's Mystery and Space anthology, and I wrote that myself. It was called Asleep to See You, and it was a cryo-sleep love story. And I love writing by myself. It's just like, it's really hard to get people to give you a chance writing if you're an artist. And, you know, that's something I talk with Becky Cloonan about a lot too, because she loves writing too. And the way she's circumvented that is that she just self-publishes the stories that she writes, like Wolves in the Mire and everything, and they're amazing. She's Eisner nominated now.
I love those.
But even with an Eisner nomination for a story that she wrote, it's not always the easiest thing to get writing jobs. So it's something that I definitely want to do, but I got to work on it.
What type of stuff, I guess, do you gravitate towards?
I really like the idea of bringing in more genres into comics, because like back when comics were such a booming thing and everyone was reading them, like men, women, children, old people, it's because there were so many different kinds of comics. Like nowadays it's like superhero comics and then your indie fare. And indie stuff, you got to be like in the know and hip to know about it. It's like street cred. But like I want to bring back, you know, the horror comics, the romance comics, the comics for kids. Like I'm interested in definitely doing this kind of genre things that aren't really being addressed right now.
Because you definitely, looking through your history, you have kind of a genre influence.
Totally, yeah.
And I believe you like Star Trek a lot. You did a werewolf comic.
Love Star Trek, love werewolves.
So it's genre fiction and genre films and.
Yeah, I consume media. I am a media fan. I like to see more kinds of stories in comics. You know, I mean, I love superhero comics a lot too, and I feel like you can do all sorts of amazing things with them. Like, you know, everyone says Hawkeye right now with Fraction and Dave Aha, but you know, that's a good example of a superhero comic that is actually kind of subverting that genre and just doing whatever it wants. You know.
Do you have influences beyond movies and comics, or?
You got to be well-rounded. Like if your only influence in comic books is other comic books, that's like an Ouroboros. You're just eating your own tail.
That's what we would, as editors, we'd always tell artists, like, quit learning to draw by looking at other comics because.
I'm ashamed to say I barely read comics. I don't have time between making them and then like looking at other stuff too, like art books or whatever, you know.
A lot of people who work in comics don't read comics. It's time. And actually when I got really into manga, it's because I was editing at Dark Horse and it was the one thing I wasn't working on.
Yeah, you're like, oh, what a sweet relief.
Yeah. So. I gotta ask what your background is, because like where you grew up, because Blade Runner was your favorite film, Leonardo da Vinci was your favorite artist. Like I'm suddenly feeling like I was the dumbest kid in the world.
No, not at all. I was born in Boston and raised in the immediate suburbs, like right on the South Shore. And I live in Somerville right now, which is 2 cities north of Boston. It's like Boston, Cambridge, Somerville. So I'm Boston, Massachusetts, born and raised. But my mother is Chinese Canadian, Chinese raised in Canada her whole life. And I've spent some time there too, like with my grandparents and everything. My dad is Irish, Boston, like you might guess, Doyle. And I'm an only child, and I always loved drawing as a kid, and my parents saw that, and they did nothing but encourage it my whole life long. You know, they made sure that I went to school. I went to the best schools they could afford to put me through, and everything that I could get into. And they always were like big proponents of being well-rounded, learning everything you can about anything. But they're like, if you want to do art, you know, that's what you're going to do.
It's interesting you talk about being an only child. When we talked to Matt Wagner, he talked about that as well, and creating his own world. And I had a sister who was older than me by 5 years, but I spent most of my childhood sort of isolating and creating my own world. Do you feel that being an only child has somehow influenced your imagination?
Absolutely, completely, because I was immensely lonely as a kid. My whole childhood long, I spent every Christmas asking for a brother or sister until I was 10, then realized I was just being annoying, terrible. But yeah, it was like I was alone. I didn't have any playmates. I went to private school, so I didn't know anyone in my neighborhood, like no kids. And my parents were very strict about TV, and there was no computer really when I was growing up. So they were like, you can watch 1 hour of TV a day after homework, and 3 hours of TV on the weekend. So that's a lot of time when you're a kid, where you have to, you know, entertain yourself, and you're not just watching the boob tube and plugging it in. So I read a ton, and I spent a lot of time make-believing by myself, you know, just like creating worlds and little games.
Well, I doubt I'm now alone in thinking that, like, I can't wait to see what you're going to do with all that stuff. So
Thank you so much.
Tomorrow's going to be finished soon, and there'll probably be a collection, and
yeah, I
hope
so.
Then we'll wait and see what's next.
Who knows what lays on the horizon.
Well, thanks, Ming. I appreciate you sitting down.
Thank you very much, Jamie.